Hi, thank you for tuning in. If you're a returning viewer, thank you so much. And if you're new to the channel, welcome. Really appreciate your company. We're trying to build a community of subscribers who are interested in insurance, in superannuation, and if I could add value to your day by walking away learning something new or stimulating some thinking around understanding your insurance arrangements within your super, then it's time well spent through my contribution to the community. A couple of weeks ago, the government announced through the federal budget some pretty big spending to stimulate the economy back to wellness once more. While everyone is focusing on the tax cuts, the job maker program, the economic recovery plan, I think there was a particular topic that I was very interested in, and it's not really getting a lot of airtime. And while there's a lot of discussions happening within the superannuation circle, I thought it was worth sharing my thoughts with you, in particular around the stapling of superannuation arrangements within your first default fund, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. So why don't we dive right into it?
So let's look at one of the less talked about items from the 2020 federal budget announcement, the stapling of your superannuation arrangement to your first super account for life. On the 6th of October, the government announced a number of changes, including a proposed reform to superannuation default arrangements. The government said that new super accounts will no longer be automatically created every time a worker changes jobs, and these reforms will ensure that your super will follow you. This is, of course, consistent with the number one recommendation from the Productivity Commission Inquiry Report on Superannuation, Assessing Efficiency and Competitiveness, which was released in December 2018. Currently, a new default superannuation account is created each and every time a person commences employment with a new employer. Each of these employers generally have their own preferred default fund. An account is created for you, and your employer's contribution is remitted to this fund unless you exercise choice and instruct them to remit your contribution elsewhere. If you leave your first employer and join another employer, a new account is yet again created for you under that new employer's default fund. And again, your employer's contribution will be remitted to your new employer's preferred default fund unless you instruct otherwise. Remember that your previous account balance with your previous employer's default fund will continue to exist and be depleted unless you do something about it. If and when you commence with a new employer yet again, this process will repeat itself, creating multiple accounts for you in the superannuation system, leaving a trail of account balances, duplicate insurance arrangements, and multiple fees. From 1 July 2021, the government is proposing a stapling arrangement where a new default super account will only be created once when you commence employment for the first time, or if you do not already have a superannuation account. Alternatively, you can elect to consolidate your super account with your new employer's default fund or any other fund of your choice. If you do nothing, the default super of your first employer is likely to be your super fund for the rest of your working life. That can be a good or a bad thing depending on how your fund is performing, and that's a whole separate topic on its own. All of your future contributions will be remitted to your first default fund, even if you have moved to a new employer, changed industries, switched from casual to permanent full-time, or moved away from a physically demanding role to a more sedentary desk job. None of these changes will matter if you're stapled to your first default fund, unless, of course, you do something about it. Here are some insurance issues you need to consider. The cost of insurance for Fund A may not be as competitive as what you're able to access under your new employer's default fund. The terms and conditions of the insurance offered under Fund A may be more onerous than the ones offered under your new employer's default fund. The cohort of members you're grouped with may no longer be appropriate if you have changed jobs or industries. Because you have left your previous employer, you may have been transferred to the fund's retained section or personal division, and you're no longer enjoying the typical benefits of a group insurance policy. Your insurance arrangements are more aligned to retail individual insurance, which is generally more onerous and more costly. Your occupation classification may no longer be an accurate representation of your new employment arrangement. There may also be a duplicate insurance like income protection cover you're still paying for under your default fund, which is already provided for by your new employer.
Clearly, the superannuation industry is watching very closely with interest to see what's going to happen. But what I'm more interested in is what you have to say. Do you think your super should be A, stapled to your first superannuation fund, or B, stapled to you and your new employer's default fund wherever you go? Thank you again for tuning in. And if you found this video useful, please consider subscribing and also forwarding the link to your friends so that they might benefit from the discussions we are having through this video. See you again in the next video.